A true horror story is one you don't know, something that can happen to any of us without warning. It's even more frightening if the person who is supposed to protect you finds out. Not everyone is a hero just because they wear uniforms. Story 1. What is that? Asked Lyudmila Alexeyevna, looking at the man's feet. There are no mice here, Aunt Luda. Maxim pointed his flashlight at the attic and peered into every corner. Come on. Maxim climbed into the attic. He didn't particularly want to. It was his day off, but his kind neighbor and patriarch was frightened by strange noises in the attic. Therefore, it was necessary to find out the cause as soon as possible. It was very easy. I removed the rats, birds, and noise sources and continued watching hockey. There were no rodents or flies, so maybe something fell. The attic was full of various junk of pensioners, with which the devil himself could break his legs. And why is there so much unnecessary junk here? Maxim muttered and went back to the stairs. Did you find anything? Cried the old lady, seeing the flashlight beam. Something must have fallen. Maxim was preparing to get off, but something stopped him. A rough, cold hand was placed on his shoulder, clasping it tightly. The man turned cautiously, illuminating the person standing behind him. An eyeless, mummy-like creature opened his mouth to reveal crooked yellow teeth. Maxim screams, the flashlight falls out of his hands and rolls down into the hatch. The glass shatters and shatters on it. Lyudmila Alexeyevna grabbed her heart and backed away, keeping her eyes on her attic. The screaming lasted her for a minute, after which everything fell silent. The neighbors came out onto the landing, and this time saw the old woman through the open trapdoor. What's wrong? Tamara, in amazement, approached Lyudmila Alexeyevna and asked, There. Maxim. Maxim what? What is he doing there? I heard noises in the attic. I asked him to come and find out where the noise was coming from. Max. Okay, shouted Anatoly to the trapdoor. Silence, answered him. Upstairs was noisy. Everyone turned to the attic, and literally a minute passed before Maxim's gnawed head flew out of the hatch. A woman screamed and cursed across the stairs, all huddled around the attic and the fallen head. Somebody call the police, shouted Tamara. Come on. Anatoly hurriedly pressed the buttons on the phone, trying to press the correct button. God, Lord, have mercy, cried Lyudmila Alexeyevna. While all the adults were in panic-stricken terror, little Petya curiously examined her head. A mummy face with a flat nose and empty eye sockets looked back at him. A streak of blood dripped from his lips, and a piece of flesh stuck between his teeth. Petya lifted his head and began to climb the stairs. His gray hand reached out to him. The boy smiled and held out his head to the attic dweller. But he wasn't aiming for the head, the very young and luscious flesh of a child. The sound of disembodied heads slamming into the floor and tiny feet tapping the stairs. The last thing Peter saw. Sony. There was a woman's voice. A young girl ran up the stairs, grabbed the boy by the ankles and pulled him back, but something held him tight. The girl was joined by a man with a large mustache. The sight was like a tug of war. However, it turned out to be a draw. The boy was torn. His torso went to the inhabitants of the attic, and his legs fell on people. The floor was black with blood. A quiet scene followed by yelling and swearing. There was so much noise that the walls shook. Everyone was running around and running. They took turns climbing into the attic with everything they could get their hands on. The entire entrance decided to deal with the intruder who disturbed their peace, but there was no way. When everyone was upstairs, the attic door slammed shut. Dim light revealed an eerie mass of mummies with crooked faces and twisted limbs. Their vacant eyes stared at the living, their crooked teeth squealed and demanded more food. And unsurprisingly, the inhabitants of the front door all turned out to be the food of the people who once lay beneath the house. Story 2. I woke up at noon within the walls of the church. When I got out of bed for a bit, my whole body was in excruciating pain and I wanted to go numb again, but not this time. After a while, I noticed that my right shoulder was bandaged. Must have been caught. I don't remember the rest of what the priest said. I had a terrible headache, and he said something about madness and demons. The police came in, and I somehow answered their question. Behind them in the doorway of the room were two other men in plain clothes. I doubt if they were the police. I also remembered my father's stern eyes. Sure, he was a soldier, but he was originally a soldier. It was as if he was scanning you from the inside, examining all your thoughts. After that, I went home. My whole body ached, my fears vanished, and only apathy and fatigue remained. As I approached the house, it was not immediately clear what had caught my attention. The window in Sveta's apartment on my floor was broken. Thick black smoke was still rising from it. There were 2 fire trucks and an ambulance in the yard, and somewhere a police siren was blaring. According to what I heard from neighbors, the official story was that Sveta got drunk and left the gas stove on, causing the apartment to burn down. In fact, some tenants say they heard loud noises coming from their burning apartment several times. I didn't mind arriving at an absolutely ridiculous version of what happened. Recent events have convinced me that prying into your neighbor's ominous affairs is silly and extremely dangerous. Later in the evening, after more intense interrogation and a vague story of a rabid dog attack, it was decided to walk to the morgue building to settle the remaining questions. The front door was locked, and a mustachioed man in a blackguard uniform stood nearby. Only a very careful eye could discern a rare car on the wall of an abandoned co-op garage near the rear of the morgue. Very strange. Everything is dark and the windows are completely tinted, like Tiger, Hummer, and UAZ hybrids. The most interesting thing is that the black car had no license plate. I took a closer look. My intuition argued that I shouldn't approach an SUV to admire it. In order not to get too deep into the maze of mystical terrors or cling too much to the wreckage of our rational understanding of the world order, I have tried to summarize all the events described into a single skeleton. I don't think his claims are far from the truth. Clearly, Sveta was not human. The way she literally folds her neighbors like rag dolls leaves no doubt that they are physically superior to humans. She stroked my shoulder too. She doesn't skim on purebred animals, but I'm not sure if she or others like her eat meat. Has its own feeding point that no one disturbs. I say Ejin because I went to various feeding stations, not just Sveta. Had she been alone, she would not have been able to find her own food, let alone eat in secret for long. Follow the path to the feeding station. Also, these creatures are excellent hunters. At least Sveta was certainly a pro and handled Ivanovic's body quickly. As for her neighbors, I had a friend in the authorities go through the database. She is, yes, an ordinary plumber with the epaulets of the Attorney General's office. She retired. I think Pyotr Ivanovich was a kind of roof in a non-human hierarchy. He searched for suitable victims. Either he didn't start looking right away, or he was just looking for a victim just happy that the man was finally out of sight. In Ivanovic's case, the former major didn't work for the agency for a long time, so we don't know what he was making. As for medicines for subtle ailments, one can only speculate here. For a long time, I couldn't find a logical explanation for the fight in the park, but I think it was all about the loot. I think the ghoul, in this case Veda, wanted to get a new victim, possibly with someone in neighboring territory who does not share it. Idiot, by your actions you alluded to carnivorous specimens. First, ruining the statistics of missing persons so that the competent authorities could deal with you. Second, food balance with neighboring areas confused. Governments collapse, chaos ensues, and competent authorities must be dealt with. In general, Ivanich did not give the green light to the next victim. This alternate conclusion indicates that there are also quite a few intermediaries between humans and ghouls. Perhaps Ivanovic was simply afraid that his skin would be treated from above. Either way, he's now listed as a missing person. I didn't see any unfortunate body bags in that park, only crumpled bushes. And Sveta paid with her life, even if she lived for her carelessness. In the case of Ivanovich in the park, she acted too openly and carelessly and managed to lose track of her strangers. Either I betrayed her identity to her fellow priest, I'm sure he had something to do with it, or they were after her because of the death of her plumber. It is either way, it was her indiscretion and self-confidence that ruined her, and I have no doubt that at the time of the so-called fire, there was a black SUV without a license plate in my front yard. Since then, I have changed residences and work in the same office. Kamra's apartment was sold to relatives far from the south. The woman herself is missing, and she is said to have been last seen near the Savlovsky railway station. She still carries around a can of holy water. I couldn't tell if it was the pepper spray or the church water that had confused her former neighbors. but Holliger spray is one of the few things that makes me feel at ease.